All right, now to women dealing with worse shit than men. Episode 16, Islamophobia. A first of its kind study into Islamophobia in Australia has actually found that an overwhelming majority of targets are women.
Yeah, 70% of victims are female, while nearly 3/4 of perpetrators are male. The report is the result of research by several universities, the Diversity Council Australia and the Islamic Sciences and Research Academy of Australia. The group studied 243 incidents involving physical, verbal and online attacks in Australia, and they found nearly 80% of women verbally abused during Islamophobic attacks were wearing a head covering, while more than 30% were with children. Researchers say the results also show a link between the occurrence of Islamic terrorist attacks and the increases in Islamophobia in Australia. At the same time, media coverage of Islamic issues, including, for example, female head and face coverings, can exacerbate the number of Islamophobic attacks. Those working with Muslim communities say these kinds of attacks can be devastating, particularly for young people.
Well, Tamara Stewart-Jones works with young Muslim Australians. She's in fact the CEO of Multicultural Youth South Australia. Tamara, thanks for joining us, first off. What are you hearing from the people that you work with?
So MISA supports around 4,000 refugee and migrant young people every year. In the past month, we have had 3 cases of violence against young people. This sort of perpetrated violence is actually occurring out in the public space, and in children as young as 13 years of age was one particular case. So we've had 3 cases. One was attacked on public transport, one within Coles, and one on a main strip here in Adelaide. So we've definitely been seeing some of the outcomes from the report, and can confirm that this is definitely occurring within our client population.
More than half, say nearly 70% of these Islamophobic attacks are happening against women, presumably because if you're a Muslim woman wearing a headscarf, that's an identifying feature. So how do we best prevent these attacks from happening?
Look, I think that it's threefold. First of all, I think there needs to be some responsibility placed on mainstream media. We're looking at a situation where stories that are being reported are not necessarily balanced. If we look at the London Bridge attacks, which happened overseas, the one feature piece that everybody tends to remember is that young woman in a hijab. So we're actually got young people who have arrived in Australia looking at integrating into the broader Australian community, and when they watch what's happening in the media, it tends to ostracise them. When they switch off of the normal mainstream media and onto social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, they're actually hearing from the Australian public about how unwanted they are. Go home, you don't belong here, go back to where you came from, and things also more insidious than that. That sort of has gained momentum to the point where it's become violent physical attacks on young women and children out in the public sphere.
There's obviously a perpetrator in all of this. There's somebody who is doing this to other people, and I feel like every time we talk about this issue, we talk about what women can do to be safe, or what the role that the media plays, or what you say on social media. Is there any focus on the people that are actually doing this?
A lot of the resourcing has focused on education for the younger generation, but we need to be looking at education for those whose ideas and everything are quite deeply ingrained.
Bearing all that in mind, is there a way we can better bridge the divide between or with newly settled communities then?
Well, look, I think that it's not just about doing policy on the fly or throwing money at programs. We need more research into this area. So we need to be looking at more research into these sorts of issues. From the research, then looking at, what kind of programs and interventions are going to be most effective.
All right. Tamara Stewart-Jones, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure, guys.